Some of you guys know that my own UFO sighting back in 2010, January 1st of 2010 to be specific, led to my, I'll say, belief in the paranormal. It led to a series of more paranormal events that I've talked about on this channel actually before. And my first video was about 3 different encounters that I had. My first and the subsequent encounters that happened after that. And that really opened up a door for me when it came to the paranormal, in realizing that, you know, in this whole world there are things that we don't necessarily see, but they're there. And whenever you see them, you know, it's like surreal, but it can never like be undone, you know. So with that being said, it's been a while since I did a video about UFOs, so I wanted to revisit that topic because I know some of you in particular are huge fans of the topic. I am too. It's probably my favorite topic because it's what I have the most experience with. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this. We're gonna cover some of the more famous UFO sightings that happened. And you've probably heard some of these before, but maybe you'll hear like some new details that you haven't heard before. Of course, I won't be able to cover these in super deep detail, but if there are any that you guys would like me to make like a full video on, then please let me know in the comments. And I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel as always. I hope you guys enjoy these UFO encounters. And here we go. In November 2006, pilots, mechanics, and other employees at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, Illinois, witnessed a flying saucer-like object hovering over Concourse C of the United Airlines terminal. A United ramp worker first spotted it around 4:30 p.m., but others quickly spied the craft as well. Witnesses described the object as dark gray and between 6 and 24 feet in diameter. Accounts varied as to whether it was spinning like a frisbee or entirely still, but all agreed that it was utterly silent. Witnesses said the object hovered just below the clouds and then shot off into the sky, leaving behind a circular hole. The Chicago Tribune reported on the sighting a few weeks later, interviewing the staff at the airport about the event. One employee was so emotionally shaken by the sighting that they experienced some religious issues. Workers also expressed frustration that government officials wouldn't conduct a more thorough investigation into the incident. The Federal Aviation Administration dismissed the sighting as weather phenomenon, but those who were there that day stood by what they saw. I tend to be scientific by nature, and I don't understand why aliens would hover over a busy airport, said one United mechanic. But I know that what I saw, and what a lot of other people saw, stood out very clearly, and it was definitely not an aircraft from this world. Dr. Mark Hammergren, an astronomer at Adler Planetarium, said the incident could have been a hole punch cloud. It's something that occurs when a propeller or jet airplane passes through when you have uniform cloud cover, and the temperature is right near the freezing point, he told the Tribune. They make liquid water droplets freeze, and a hazy disk of ice crystals descends from a hole, and it looks like a perfect hole punched in the cloud. Still, others felt that the government should have taken the event more seriously and conducted an investigation. Mark Roediger, scientific director at the Center for UFO Studies, said, "It's an unknown object over O'Hare, and it's been seen by official personnel. And does United or the FAA take it seriously? Of course not. They have zero interest because UFOs can't exist. But how can you not worry about something hovering over an airport after 9/11? It doesn't make sense." The incident remains unresolved. On October 4th, 1967, at roughly 11:20 p.m., witnesses reported seeing something crash into the waters of Shag Harbor in Nova Scotia, Canada. About a dozen people saw orange lights hovering above the harbor and heard something whistling like a bomb, followed by a loud bang. According to the municipality of Barrington, Witnesses initially believed they had just observed the tragic outcome of an airplane crash. Immediately, they reported the impact to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. RCMP Constable Ron Pound had also happened to see the strange lights as he was driving along Highway 3 toward Shag Harbor. Like the other witnesses, Pound described seeing 4 lights attached to a singular flying craft, which he estimated to be around 60 feet long. Constable Pound arrived at the crash site to investigate alongside Police Corporal Victor Werbiecki, Constable Ron O'Brien, and several local residents. In the water where the craft had crashed, Constable Pound and the other witnesses watched as a yellow light moved slowly across the surface, leaving a trail of foam in its wake. The light dipped in and out of the water, but was still too far from the shore to clearly make it out. By the time the Coast Guard arrived, the light was gone. The strange yellowish foam was still present, though, indicating that something may have disappeared into the waters below. Several theories emerged about the object's origins, with some claiming it may have been a Russian spacecraft. There were also rumors that the US government conducted a follow-up investigation, but officials never confirmed or denied this. Divers later explored the waters of Shag Harbor to retrieve the object. They discovered that the UFO had indeed submerged itself and traveled underwater for roughly 25 miles to Government Point, which was located near a submarine detection base. Witnesses at the base saw the object on sonar, and soon the Canadian Navy began planning a salvage operation. Then, something strange happened. A second UFO appeared on sonar near the first, and both of them resurfaced and vanished into the sky. To this day, neither object has ever been identified. On March 13, 1997, thousands of people across Nevada, Arizona, and northern Mexico spotted a series of UFOs hovering in the night sky above. Witnesses reported several smaller objects that looked like floating orbs, and a larger V-shaped aircraft the size of several football fields over Phoenix, Arizona. This incident is known as the Phoenix Lights, and it's one of the most hotly debated UFO sightings of all time. The UFOs remained in the air for about 3 hours, from roughly 7:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., with thousands of civilians staring up at them in awe. Pilots in the region also reported what they were seeing to air traffic controllers, but none of them saw anything out of the ordinary on their radars. Some estimates claim the larger UFO is roughly the size of 3 football fields, but others believed it was more than a mile long. A 31-year-old man named Dana Valentine saw the Phoenix Lights from his backyard and called his father, an aeronautics engineer, outside to see them. The two watched as the V-shaped craft passed them by, hovering just 500 feet above. "We could see the outline of a mass behind the lights, but you couldn't actually see the mass," Valentine later said. "It was more like a gray distortion of the night sky, wavy. I don't know exactly what it was, but I know it's not a technology the public has ever heard of before." Another witness, 54-year-old Tim Lay, claimed he also saw the lights. Like Valentine, Lay said, "You couldn't actually see the object. All you could see was the outline, as though something was blotting out the stars." Despite the high number of witnesses, the US government was quick to try and discredit their testimonies. Officials claimed the orbs were nothing more than flares deployed as part of a military exercise, and then Arizona Governor Fife Symington III initially mocked the public's concerns, unveiling someone dressed as an alien at a press conference. However, Symington would later say that he too had seen the objects and believed they were not of this world. One of the most significant issues regarding the credibility of UFO sightings is often a lack of proof. Photographs and videos are fantastic when available, but skeptics are quick to disregard these as evidence. In the modern age, it's especially easy to fake or alter images, further complicating any claims of authenticity. However, the Cache Landrum UFO incident is notable because its evidence couldn't have been faked. The witnesses had nothing to gain from their story and a lot to lose. The encounter, as retold by Robert Schaefer in the Skeptical Inquirer, took place on December 29, 1980, around 9 p.m. Betty Cache, Vicki Landrum, and Landrum's 7-year-old grandson Colby were driving near Houston, Texas, when they spotted something in the sky above them. At first they thought they were seeing a helicopter, or perhaps a low-flying plane. After all, there were airfields in the area, but the object didn't look like anything they'd ever seen. For starters, it was massive and shaped like a diamond, and it occasionally sent out flames toward the road below. Cash felt a mix of fear and fascination as she pulled the car over to the side of the road and exited the vehicle. Suddenly, black helicopters surrounded the UFO. They seemed to rush in from all directions, Cash recalled. It seemed like they were trying to encircle the thing. The flames put out by the UFO were allegedly so hot they made the car impossible to touch. But that's not all. Almost immediately, the witnesses began to experience severe health complications. All three suffered from nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, weakness, burning eyes, and pain similar to a sunburn. Betty Cash's symptoms continued to worsen over the next few days. She developed massive blisters, and by the time she went to the hospital on January 3rd, 1981, the pain was so intense that she could barely walk. Cash was discharged after 12 days, but soon returned to the hospital for another 2 weeks. All three witnesses eventually recovered, but the incident stuck with them. Initial reports chalked their illness up to ionizing radiation syndrome, but experts later claimed that if they had indeed been suffering from radiation poisoning, the dose would have been lethal based on the symptoms they displayed. Meanwhile, skeptics have pointed to the possibility that the entire event was a case of Munchausen syndrome, a psychiatric condition in which someone fakes a disease. The burn patterns on Betty Cash's arms, for instance, were distinctly round in a way that radiation burns wouldn't be. Her medical records have also never been released. Critics argue that this is to avoid any mention of the term Munchausen syndrome, although that's just as much a theory as the actual UFO sighting itself. On September 16, 1994, dozens of students at the aerial school in Rua, Zimbabwe, returned home frightened and mystified. When questioned by their parents, the children said they'd seen something strange outside. At least one silver craft landed in a nearby field, and odd-looking men with large dark eyes emerged. The students claimed the creatures spoke to them telepathically and showed them visions of the devastation Earth could face if humanity continued to damage the environment. They also said the men moved in slow motion and could seemingly teleport. The incident became known as the aerial school phenomenon. Naturally, their parents were concerned. Whether aliens had indeed landed near the school or not, the children had seen something that scared them. The school began receiving dozens of phone calls, and the news spread like wildfire within days. It eventually reached the ears of BBC's Zimbabwe correspondent, Tim Leach, who sat down with the children for a series of interviews in which they all shared some variation of the same story. The BBC broadcast also garnered the attention of ufologist Cynthia Hind and eventually Harvard professor of psychiatry John E. Mack. Mack decided to visit the aerial school and speak to the children. They told him of the strange men's message that pollution mustn't be. To this day, many of the former students have gone on record, reaffirming that what they told Leach and Mack nearly 30 years ago was true. On August 21, 1955, Billy Ray Taylor of Pennsylvania was visiting his friend Elmer Lucky Sutton at his farmhouse in the small town of Kelly, Kentucky. Taylor stepped outside to gather water from the well when he saw something, quote, real bright, with an exhaust all the colors of the rainbow, hovering in the sky above him. He ran back inside to tell the others, including his wife and Sutton's family, that he had just seen a UFO. At first, the others just laughed it off, but then the dogs started barking. Someone, or something, was coming toward the house. The terrified group gathered in the farmhouse and looked outside to find what they described as small goblin-like creatures with round, oversized heads, and long arms with talons that nearly touched the ground. They said the creature's eyes glowed with a yellowish light, and their bodies shined like silver metal. The Little Silver Men, as they came to be known, continued to approach the farmhouse, and that's when the men inside started shooting. After a battle that lasted hours, the Suttons and the Taylors fled the property and made their way to the police station in nearby Hopkinsville. They seemed genuinely frightened when they arrived. One member of the group even had a pulse of 140 beats per minute. As Police Chief Russell Greenwell noted at the time, these aren't the kind of people who normally run to the police for help. Investigators never found any evidence of aliens, though. Soon enough, the story spread throughout the small town, and the Suttons were ostracized from the community and forced to abandon their home to escape the ridicule. Although they were described at the time as Little Silver Men, the term Little Green Men was the one that stuck, and it came as a result of the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter. On April 6, 1966, more than 300 children and staff at Westall High School in Melbourne, Australia, witnessed a round silver object about the size of a car hovering near the school. Per a report from news.com.au, physicist James E. McDonald later interviewed Andrew Greenwood, a science teacher from the school, about the incident. Greenwood explained that 5 planes surrounded the object as onlookers watched from below. He called it the most amazing flying he'd ever seen in his life. McDonald recounted, the planes were doing everything possible to approach the object, and he said how they all avoided collision he will never know. As the aircraft tried to approach it, the UFO would accelerate at different rates, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, before coming to a complete stop, only to continue its erratic acceleration. The cat and mouse game lasted nearly 20 minutes, while around 350 students and staff watched. Then, the UFO suddenly flew off, and the school's headmaster told everyone to return to class. McDonald said the headmaster had informed the children they would be severely punished if they discussed what they saw. He also threatened the staff, saying they'd lose their jobs if they mentioned it at all. Later, several witnesses claimed that men in black suits visited them and warned them against speaking out about the incident. Despite this, Greenwood said he tried to talk to other staff about what they'd seen, but they refused to say anything. One student eventually spoke with Greenwood about it, but a half hour later, when he brought up the subject again, she wouldn't say a word. On June 27, 1947, Harold Dahl and his son Charles were on a boat near the eastern shore of Maury Island, Washington, in Puget Sound. Suddenly, 6 donut-shaped objects appeared in the sky above them and dropped a barrage of metallic debris. Dahl had his camera with him and managed to snap a few photographs of the strange flying craft, but as soon as they appeared, they were gone. When Dahl and his son returned ashore, he showed the photographs to his supervisor, Fred Crispin. Skeptical, Crispin investigated the scene for himself and allegedly saw one of the flying objects hovering above. Before he could share the story of photographs, however, Dahl received an unexpected visitor. The next morning, he said a man in a black suit came to him. The man described Dahl's own experience to him in scarily accurate detail, warning him that if he spoke about what happened, he'd suffer the consequences. Dahl and Crispin would later come out and say that their experience was a hoax, but it was the first time anyone had actually mentioned the eponymous figures known as the Men in Black, members of a shadowy, quasi-governmental organization who appear in a number of real sightings of UFOs. The Men in Black showed up again in the story of Albert K. Bender, a UFO fanatic who published the short-lived magazine Space Review, which covered all manner of strange aerial phenomena. In one 1953 edition of Space Review, Bender also claimed to have been visited by 3 men wearing dark suits, who allegedly demanded that he stop publishing information about UFOs. That same year, Bender shut down his magazine entirely. He later shared his story with author Gray Barker, who published a collection of stories about the Men in Black in his 1956 book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. Since then, alleged encounters with the Men in Black have been a staple of real UFO sightings. Around 3 a.m. on December 26, 1980, soldiers stationed at an Air Force base near Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England, reportedly witnessed a bizarre UFO. Two security patrolmen near the eastern gate of Royal Air Force Woodbridge saw lights in the forest. The patrolmen requested permission to investigate what they believed to be a downed aircraft, and a third man joined them to search for the plane. That was when they encountered a strange glowing object in the forest. When they approached, they found a metallic triangular UFO that was about 10 feet across and 6 feet high. In a report known as the Halt Memo, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt recounted the experience. It illuminated the entire forest with a white light. The object itself had a pulsing red light on top and a bank of blue lights underneath. The object was hovering or on legs. As the patrolmen approached the object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. At this time, the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. An hour later, witnesses spotted the craft near the back gate of the base, and then it disappeared, never to be seen again. The next day, officials returned to the supposed landing site and noticed 3 clear depressions in the ground where the object had sat. The military called local police to corroborate the findings, and the officers likewise made note of the indentations. Halt, meanwhile, kept a detailed log of everything on a cassette recorder. A copy of the Halt tape was released in 1984 by Colonel Sam Morgan. In it, Halt described a red sun-like light through the forest trees, which moved about and pulsed, as it emitted glowing particles and broke off into 5 pieces before disappearing. The whole account was so shocking that Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher allegedly said, "Don't tell the people." The Rendlesham Forest UFO incident now carries the same weight and infamy in England as Roswell does in America.